Ambulance crew arrived at the call, none of the medics could have imagined that they would find the body of a young woman practically breathless, mutilated and barely breathing by the side of the road. But the main surprise was not even that, but how a few weeks later the same girl, model Maria Kovalchuk, would give a detailed interview exposing a whole network of Arab parties, where, according to her, cruelty, fear and violence reign. At first, no one believed such stories were possible in today's world. Some said, "That's an exaggeration," while others silently shook their heads. But when the investigators saw the numerous injuries on Maria's body, undoubtedly the result of prolonged beatings, the doubts disappeared. The question became different: how far this network extends and how many more girls could fall victim to such closed events. Today you will hear a new interview Maria gave while in rehab and learn how her tragic story began, the abuse she endured and how she miraculously survived. This account will sound like the script for a dystopian movie, but, judging by Kovalchuk's own testimony, is closer to reality than any fiction. In fact, Maria sheds light on a whole layer of the shadow industry, where behind the big names of sheiks and multi-million-dollar budgets, torture, humiliation, and possibly murder are hidden. In order to understand how yesterday's girl with a dream of catwalks ended up in such a hell, you will have to dive into the details. From the first enticing promises to the exit from the intensive care unit, where she literally crawled out of the other world. If you think that closed Arab parties are a fiction or a scare story invented by journalists for the sake of hype, Maria's testimony will make you reconsider. She herself says, "This system has been working for a year or two. Girls are smuggled out and treated like toys. But no one believes it until they get there themselves." Despite the threats, Kovalchuk dared to give interviews, hoping to save those who might still fall into the same trap. So, dim the lights and get ready. Here is one of the most shocking truths told through the voices of those who have experienced the underside of glitz and ruthless cruelty. Maria's story began trivially. Born in a small provincial town, she dreamed of a modeling career and a social life. From childhood, she was surrounded by Vogue magazines and unattainable images of the world's top models, and local beauty contests only fueled her ambitions. Around the age of 20, she moved to the capital, where she rented a modest room and began to go to castings. In the beginning, luck smiled infrequently. The maximum goal, occasional shooting in the advertising of hair products. But persistence did its job. She noticeably pumped portfolio, sometimes going on the catwalk of local designers. Maria quickly realized that financially modeling business is unstable. Contracts are rare. Fees are often modest. She wanted more: beautiful shoots abroad, big shows, Insta-star status. And then in her surroundings began to glimpse people telling about easy earnings. Just a few days of accompanying VIP guests in a luxurious place, and you can pay back debts or cover the rent of the apartment for 6 months in advance. It sounded too tempting. She first heard about this format from a couple of star models in the dressing room. A weekend getaway to an Arabian chic minus all the financial problems, one of them joked. No details, only slippery hints. "We have nothing to be ashamed of. We just sit in beautiful dresses, drinking champagne, smiling." Maria only shrugged, but the thought of Arab parties lingered in her mind. After all, it was already unbearable to work 24/7 and receive many times less. Soon she received a call from a stranger who introduced herself as the coordinator of a VIP event. She offered $5,000 for 2 days in Dubai, with no obligations except to appear in the right place, look beautiful, follow the dress code. She said, "There's already a deposit for you. If you agree, we'll do all the paperwork and pay for the ticket." Maria first took it as a fraud, but then she was shown real photos of 2 models who supposedly successfully returned from the same event. The girls were glowing in the pictures, surrounded by luxury. Maria then thought, what if this is a chance to get caught up in the world of big glamour? She said yes, and so began her road to hell. Upon arrival in Dubai, she was met by a man named Rashid, who called himself the manager. He was in a European suit, driving an expensive SUV. He was friendly, took her to a 4-hotel. Everything looked decent. "You'll be paid for everything here. Just be ready for the party tomorrow," he said. "Just don't ask any questions and don't deviate from the plan." Maria only nodded. The next day, however, the first alarming moment occurred. Rashid demanded that she surrender her cell phone to avoid leaking photos with VIP guests. Maria hesitated, but remembered the words of her acquaintances that this was a normal privacy requirement, and agreed. She was told, "Spend the day at the spa, and we'll pick you up in the evening." She felt as if her life was no longer her own, but after convincing herself that everything was under control, she went to get ready. She chose a dress and did her hair. In the evening, she was brought to the villa, where, according to her description, there was a festive atmosphere of luxury. Lots of lights, fountains, tables with viands, everything like in the movies about Oriental fairy tales. There were other girls there, each in a luxurious outfit. Some were talking quietly, others, on the contrary, were laughing and broadcasting live. Apparently, their phones were not taken away or they had special conditions. Maria noticed that there were guards walking around the perimeter. The strange thing was that there were quite a few male guests as well, all displaying high status and power. For the first 2 hours, everything seemed relatively normal. Champagne flowed, music played, girls were introduced to the guests, and they had small talk about the weather, fitness, and culture. But soon Maria began to feel that several people in Arabian clothes were looking at her strangely, as if they were assessing her obedience. One of the girls whispered to her for a brief moment, "Don't look them in the eye too boldly. They don't like that." Maria was taken aback, but didn't ask any questions, trying to act friendly. Toward midnight, the atmosphere changed. There were fewer and fewer guests left, and the girls disappeared into different rooms. Maria was soon left with 3 men in white robes, who were introduced as sheiks. They sat on cushioned couches, with guards serving nearby. One of the sheiks addressed Maria in broken English, asking her to bring drinks and sit closer to him. She complied, though it didn't seem quite as promised. After all, they said she didn't have to be a servant. But she thought, these must be the usual tokens of hospitality. Suddenly, one of the sheiks, Maria remembered his name as said, began to tell how he adores Russian beauties because they are submissive and great at fulfilling any desire. Maria sensed something wrong and decided to distance herself slightly, but Said grabbed her hand and pulled her against him. At first she tried to politely pull away, but saw the guard take a warning step forward. And then things began to happen that Maria called the beginning of insanity. Right in front of another model who was in the same room, Said roughly groped Maria, saying that she should realize who is the boss. When Maria tried to break free, he punched her in the face. The guard, meanwhile, stood like a stone, making no attempt to intervene. The girl who saw it all turned pale but remained silent. She later whispered to Maria, "Just do what he wants or it will be worse." According to Kovalchuk, at this point she realized what is called the point of no return. No conventional rules of decency do not work here. "I gave them my phone, around a foreign country, in the villa around the guards," comments Maria. "I was alone against their world. You can't call the police here. I realized that any attempt to resist would lead to even worse consequences. But the instinct of self-preservation prevailed over submission." She said she broke free at the first opportunity and tried to run out into the corridor. She noticed someone crying somewhere behind the wall. Hearing this, Maria wanted to help, but realized she was helpless herself. Eventually the guards caught up with her in the hallway, in front of several people. No one intervened. They threw me on the floor, kicked me. The same Saeed, walking by, mockingly said, "You still have time to realize where you belong." In the interview, Maria cries as she recalls, "I never thought I would be in this situation. These people bullied me just for fun. They liked to feel their power. And the other girls must have been broken earlier because they didn't even try to help." She was later brought to her knees, ordered to apologize for her rebellion. When she refused, the beatings resumed. According to Maria, she spent that night in a room that resembled a utility room. She was locked in there with 2 other models. One was in tears, repeating, "We were sure it was just a party. Oh God, we're going to be killed." The other was silent, clutching at her torn dress. In the morning, a guard came in and said they were allowed to clean up and go out for breakfast if they were willing to forget their antics and continue work. Maria, on the other hand, became indignant. threatening that she would inform the police and the embassy. The guard then made it clear that the jokes were over. "It doesn't work here. No one tells us what to do. Your embassy can't find you if we don't want them to." And as if to confirm his words, there were rumors going around the villa that one of the girls who continued to resist had disappeared without a trace and no one knew where she was. Maria tried to find out if it was possible to leave voluntarily, to cancel the contract. But everyone she spoke to only warned that there was a huge fine for violating the contract, and you might be considered a traitor. Other girls, apparently, had already accepted it. Some were bribed with promises of additional money and gifts, and if someone did not agree, threats and physical force were used. The most gruesome details that Maria gave were about cases of entertainment organized at night for those who were especially close. According to her, some of the rich guests liked to look on in fear, driving the girls to panic by forcing them to carry out humiliating or dangerous orders. Rumor had it that at some events it came down to rituals involving animals and bloody scenes. In Kovalchuk's case, she saw several girls returning from some rooms in a state of shock, and one could barely move her legs, the abrasions on her body obvious. She recalls that on the evening of the second day she was called back to Sed's room. 2 other men were in the room. A guard roughly pushed her to her knees. Saeed yelled that he was displeased with her behavior. "I saw some manic cruelty in his eyes," Maria said. "He was saying I had no right to disobey. When I turned my back again, he hit me and his buddies laughed." Eventually, she twitched and provoked the guard into giving her another beating. "I realized that I could be killed, but I couldn't keep quiet anymore," she explains in her interview. After that, she was beaten very hard, thrown to the floor several times, which is probably when her ribs were broken. All 3 guests were in the room at that moment, some of them spurring the guard, some of them videotaping it. When Kovalchuk woke up, she was in a car being driven by unknown people. "I didn't feel the time, but I realized that we were going far away, outside the city," she says. "I could hear bits and pieces of conversation in Arabic. Then the car was stopped. Someone pulled her out and threw her to the ground. I couldn't move. I thought it was the end," she says. In a semi-conscious state, Maria lay there until random passers-by came up and called an ambulance. That's how she was found, bleeding, with broken bones, no documents and no phone. No one knew who she was, and it was only later that doctors identified her. When the police investigation began, it was discovered that the visit to the country had been arranged through intermediaries, and none of the escorts had left official data. Her contract turned out to be fake and the ends in the water. Doctors repeatedly said that Maria had severe injuries and there was a risk of complications. The first days, when her consciousness cleared, she was delirious and screamed in her sleep. "I saw them hitting me again," she admitted as she recovered. Police made several attempts to take her statement, but at the time Kovalchuk was still afraid. "I was threatened that if I told, they would be done with me," she later explained. After weeks of treatment and with the support of human rights activists, the girl dared to speak openly. "They have already crippled me. There is nothing more to lose," she said. Journalists seized on the story and helped get her words out into the public eye. And that's when the threats started, the strange calls. The social media tried to devalue her and accuse her of lying. But Maria held on. Slowly recovering from surgeries on ribs and limbs, she developed a plan to give a detailed interview revealing every step of her hellish journey. This interview, which lasted about 3 hours, Maria gave to 2 journalists from a reputable publication as well as a group of human rights activists. Sitting on a hospital bed with a bandaged arm, she patiently answered questions. She described in detail all the stages, from luring to beating. She noted the names of people she remembered, said and other guests, mentioned a distinctive villa behind a high fence. She named the agency that had helped arrange the trip. As it turned out, it had already been mentioned in dubious stories more than once. Her voice on the tape sounded flat or burst into tears. When asked if she had heard about rituals and sacrifices, Maria said she had not seen anything obviously satanic, but she had heard someone shouting, "Don't kill," and smelled blood. It may have been about animals, but she is certain that there were scenes of extreme cruelty going on, perhaps as entertainment. When asked by a journalist why no one complained earlier, Maria explained, Some models who came back in one piece preferred to close their eyes and enjoy their earnings. Others who got abused were afraid to complain. She is sure the scale is bigger than it seems. I heard from someone that girls are brought in batches from Eastern Europe, Asia, even Africa. It's just that not all the stories come out. After the release of Maria's interview, more and more people began to remember about similar cases of missing models. The two girls, Aliona and Vika, whose bodies were found under questionable circumstances, are now being considered in light of the systemic nature of such criminal schemes. Anti-trafficking experts recognize it is likely that Maria has described only the tip of the iceberg. But so far, there is no global international will to stop such parties. Money and connections are stopping investigators' efforts. Kovalchuk admits that one can forget about her modeling career. After such traumas and emotional turmoil, she is unlikely to be able to calmly go on the catwalk or go on new invitations. Plus, scars are left, and doctors talk about the need for long-term psychotherapy. I don't know who I'll be when I recover, Maria says, but I know for sure that I will speak out and help other girls not to fall into this trap. In a conversation with a journalist, she mentioned that she is considering the idea of creating a foundation or self-help community where victims can share information and receive legal support. She also said she would be willing to appear on television if there is a platform willing to take this to the federal level. Let people see that I'm a real person, not a fake. But there have already been attempts to slander her by spreading compromising materials. Maria is sure people connected with the villa are behind it. They need to defame her reputation at any cost so that her words are not taken seriously. Insiders report that some of the mentioned Arab clients may have urgently left the country or gone into the shadows. Some of them may not even remember Maria's name, as there are dozens of girls at such parties. On the other hand, there are rumors that some of the high-ranking officials are extremely dissatisfied with the information leak. And if too many names are mentioned, the story will turn into a high-profile scandal. Then links to corruption and patronage in law enforcement agencies may surface. The money they put into these parties is huge, explains one lawyer familiar with the modeling business. And girls who get there often go willingly, blinded by the possibility of a quick buck. But when they get inside, they see another reality. Everything can be decided by force. In some cases, the authorities turn a blind eye because a huge financial resource comes into play. According to Maria, she heard about 2 girls who disappeared about a year ago, exactly after the same promises. This coincides with the previously mentioned stories of Aliona and Vika in the media. Police never formally linked their disappearance to Arab parties. But now investigators may consider this version as well. If it turns out that other young girls have fallen into the dead zone of a similar villa, it will become clear. Everything repeats with frightening regularity. I'm afraid we won't find some of them missing alive anymore, Maria sighs. But if no one tells, this will go on indefinitely. There are reports that journalists are conducting an independent investigation, trying to reach the middlemen who arranged the visas and tickets. However, it is not easy to prove that they had malicious intent. The contract is usually formal, and no one wants to look into the details. Professionals who study crimes against women say that the actions in such networks are very complicated legally. The movement of girls is legal. The victims themselves do not always realize the risk, and when violence happens, it can occur on private property abroad, where it is unrealistic to find traces after a while. Maria's position gives hope, says one human rights activist. But for a real result, it is necessary to find a couple more brave witnesses who will confirm her words, give the same names and details. Otherwise, everything may turn out to be unsubstantiated. Maria, however, does not lose her determination. She says she is ready to cooperate with any authorities, as long as they protect her. It is expected that she will have to undergo interrogations, confrontations, and possibly court hearings if the case progresses. But historically, such cases are often stymied by a lack of evidence. According to her family, Kovalchuk plans to continue her rehabilitation, but public interest in her person is very high. She has already been offered paid interviews, where she has been promised large sums for even tougher details. However, Maria says the aim is not to make money, but to warn others. Doctors fear the constant stress and pressure could slow her recovery. Maria Kovalchuk's story is an account of how the illusion of a posh life can turn out to be a nightmare. Her interview is full of details that evoke horror and disgust. Fights, forced labor, sadistic tendencies of some guests, and most importantly, complete impunity. Maybe someone reading these lines will think again before signing a dubious VIP contract, without studying all the risks. Maria spoke out against the system, which, according to her, has already ruined more than one model. If her voice is heard, there is a high probability that at least some of the victims will also signal and break up the conveyor belt of violent Arab parties. If the wave of interest subsides, things will probably go back to normal. Rich clients will continue to buy silence and bodies, and girls who dream of money will fall into the death trap. We hope this long and complicated story will make you take a fresh look at the world of pretty pictures and luxury rides. Behind the scenes, there may be broken fates and mangled bodies. Maria Kovalchuk's interview is just one loud cry in the void, but maybe this very cry will save someone's life from the horror behind the high walls of Oriental villas. Like, share this video with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and leave comments. Perhaps it is your activity that will help this story to get even more resonance. Take care of yourself and your loved ones, and remember, sometimes beautiful promises can hide the cruelest reality. See you in the next issues of our documentary investigation.